He appeared from nowhere, a sharply dressed man with a Rolex that gleamed under chandelier light, a smile that disarmed even the most skeptical investor, and a name, Victor Caldwell, that no one could verify beyond a decade ago. Yet within months, he was on the covers of magazines, the toast of Silicon Valley, the keynote speaker at global finance summits. But there was one problem. Victor Caldwell didn't exist. Not really. Behind the tailored suits and billion-dollar startups was a ghost. No family, no childhood friends, no university records, just a perfectly crafted illusion and a trail of ruin. Before he was Victor Caldwell, he was Elliot Granger, born in a crumbling Detroit neighborhood to a mother who disappeared before he turned 10 and a father who spent most of his life behind bars. Elliot learned early that the world didn't care about the truth, only the version that looked best on paper. By 16, he was forging IDs. By 19, he had impersonated a trust fund heir to live rent-free in Manhattan for nearly a year. By 22, he'd changed his name legally 3 times and disappeared without a trace. Victor Caldwell was just his final act, the most convincing lie he ever lived. It started with Novice Tech, a revolutionary fintech startup, promising to decentralize global banking. It was all jargon and ambition, yet investors flocked in. The pitch deck? Stolen. The software? Non-existent. The founding team? Fabricated LinkedIn profiles. Still, $27 million poured in. Victor wore his first tailored suit the day after the funding closed. The next week, he threw a yacht party. The week after that, he fired the entire staff. Because none of them were real to begin with. What happens when no one checks your resume? Victor appeared on Bloomberg, CNBC, and TechCrunch. He spoke in buzzwords so elaborate they sounded prophetic. The media hailed him as the next Musk. A $500 million valuation followed. Every lie he told was built on a truth people wanted to hear. Fast money, innovation, disruption. He didn't just scam people. He gave them a fantasy they were desperate to believe. And that made him untouchable. But behind the headlines were real people. Startups he crushed under fake acquisitions, retirees who put their life savings into his funds, employees who found out their stock options were worthless when the shell companies collapsed overnight. One woman, Linda Reyes, lost her home after investing everything in Victor's IPO. She never recovered. Another man, a promising developer named Jordan Kim, took his life after being framed for code theft Victor orchestrated to hide his tech failures. Victor never flinched. He called it collateral damage. After burning the US market, Victor went international: Dubai, Singapore, Zurich. He launched Global Edge Capital, promising offshore wealth solutions. He charmed royal families, bought influence in parliaments, and brokered fake mergers between billion-dollar companies that never existed. Interpol issued a quiet notice. The SEC flagged him. But Victor was already moving faster than the system could catch up. Burning identities, creating new passports, and bribing anyone who stood in his way. But someone was watching. In a cramped office in London, forensic accountant Eva Morrow stumbled on discrepancies in shell company transfers tied to a failed African mining project. The deeper she looked, the more names she found, names that led to Victor Caldwell. But Eva wasn't just an analyst. She was the daughter of one of Victor's earliest victims. Her father died penniless after Victor's first fund collapsed. She made it her life's mission to expose him. She had no idea what danger she was walking into. Eva traced over 300 companies registered in offshore tax havens, each connected by a strand of false addresses, shared IPs, or recycled board members. They weren't businesses. They were cover stories. And the deeper she dug, the more she found a disturbing truth. Victor wasn't working alone. There were lawyers, accountants, politicians, people at the top, willing to look the other way or help him hide billions for a cut. This wasn't a solo con. It was an empire. Victor's financial empire relied on a man no one had ever seen, Carter Vale, the mysterious CFO listed on nearly every one of Victor's companies. But Carter didn't exist. His photo was AI-generated, his identity tied to a deceased Swiss accountant, and his email routed through 6 servers across the globe. Still, every audit, every investor meeting, every SEC document bore his name. Eva managed to trace a transaction linked to Carter, A $40 million payment funneled through a Venezuelan bank, tied to a bribe. It was the first hard thread of fraud she could prove. But it made her a target. After Eva's report was flagged to international regulators, she noticed her emails were being intercepted. Her apartment was broken into, nothing stolen, just disturbed. Her phone began to click. Calls dropped at odd times. Then came the anonymous package. Inside was a USB with one file, her father's suicide note. Someone wanted her to stop. Someone who had access to sealed records. She didn't stop. She went underground instead. In Zurich, billionaire hedge fund manager Andreas Keller started asking questions about Victor's private equity fund. He'd invested $200 million and wanted to see real returns. Instead, he saw forged acquisition documents, fake profit sheets, and inflated valuations. He threatened legal action. 3 weeks later, Andreas's private jet crashed in the Alps. The cause? Mechanical failure. But an anonymous pilot came forward, saying the jet was perfectly fine the day before. Victor didn't just erase people financially. He erased them completely. In 2022, Victor announced a landmark deal. His biotech firm Genevance had developed a cure for a rare blood disease. The news skyrocketed his company's value to $3.8 billion overnight. But the clinical trials? Fabricated. The patients? Actors? The scientific board? Non-existent. A young journalist named Marla Diaz, fresh out of grad school, uncovered the truth after finding a stock image used as a patient testimonial. She pitched the story to every major outlet. No one published it. They were all investors. Victor operated from a fortified villa in Monaco, with encrypted servers in the basement and ex-special forces as his private security. Cameras, drones, signal jammers, he was paranoid, and for good reason. Interpol had been circling for months, but every time they neared him, Victor vanished. He owned over 16 passports and had bribed officials in 5 countries. If cornered, he could disappear within an hour. He didn't fear prison. He didn't believe he could be caught. While digging through old court records, Eva found something strange. An old alias linked to a sealed juvenile fraud case in Michigan. The name? Elliot Granger. She cross-referenced the address listed in that file to a burned-down home in Detroit. The pieces clicked. Victor Caldwell wasn't his real name. He was a foster system dropout, a ghost with no birth certificate, who built a billion-dollar con using nothing but charm, lies, and reinvention. The myth was cracking. Victor's final play was his boldest. He announced he was launching Caldwell Space, a private aerospace company to rival SpaceX. He showed doctored videos of test flights, faked footage of zero-gravity labs, even staged a satellite launch with Hollywood-level CGI. Investors dumped over $1.2 billion into the venture. Victor was already preparing his exit plan, transferring funds into untraceable crypto wallets, selling off assets, closing companies. He was going to vanish forever, but someone beat him to it. Victor's inner circle wasn't as loyal as he believed. Arjun Bhatt, his former CTO, had grown increasingly uneasy watching lives destroyed while Victor partied in penthouses. Arjun had been secretly collecting evidence, email trails, shell invoices, voice recordings, and he'd handed them over to Eva. Now she had everything: proof of wire fraud, fake audits, insider trading, offshore laundering, and more. Enough for a dozen indictments. She just needed one person to listen. Federal prosecutor Marian Doyle had seen conmen before, but nothing like this. When Eva delivered the flash drive, Marianne was skeptical, until she saw a transfer of $14 million to a Panamanian company named after her own brother-in-law, a known lobbyist. This went deeper than one man. It was a global network. She launched a sealed indictment under the radar. If Victor caught wind of it, he'd flee. They had one shot. With Interpol, the FBI, and Europol now working in tandem, a plan was formed. Victor would be speaking at the Monaco Global Finance Forum, a televised, high-security event. Cameras, crowds, diplomats. He wouldn't expect a takedown. Agents disguised as tech investors would surround him. Once he stepped off stage, they'd move in. Eva watched the live stream from a bunker in Paris. Victor smiled on camera, made promises to millions, and talked about transparency. Then he stepped down from the podium, and everything changed. Victor adjusted his cufflinks, ready to make another $1 million handshake. Then came the tap on the shoulder. "Victor Caldwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice." The cameras didn't cut away. They zoomed in. For a moment, Victor smirked, as if it was a joke, another performance. But when the cuffs clicked and the crowd gasped, his eyes changed. He wasn't the predator anymore. He was the prey. News spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire conman exposed. Victor Caldwell, the greatest fraud of our time." Within hours, investors were pulling out. Share prices crashed. Companies linked to Victor filed for emergency bankruptcy. Politicians scrubbed photos of him from their social media. Foundations he supported deleted entire websites. The illusion shattered, and behind it, a hollow empire of nothing. For the first time, the world saw Victor not as a genius, but as a thief in a custom suit. In a secured black site outside Geneva, authorities cracked into Victor's personal encrypted server, buried behind 14 layers of firewalls and biometric failsafes. What they found was staggering. Blueprints for more than 80 fake companies, scripts for staged interviews, hacked email trails from rival firms, a list of 117 global clients he had blackmailed. Each file told a story. Each story ruined someone. And yet, Victor had documented everything. Why? Because in his mind, it was a legacy. While the media focused on the billions lost, few reported the lives destroyed. A 62-year-old janitor named Patrick Langley had invested $25,000, his entire pension, into Caldwell Energy. He died of a heart attack the day Victor was arrested. A cancer patient, Elisa Mendel, had stopped treatment because Victor's biotech firm promised a miracle drug launching next quarter. There was no drug. Real people, real lives, forgotten in the glamour of the scam. Victor sold hope and killed it. Victor's trial began 14 months after his arrest. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, victims, curious billionaires who once shook his hand. He arrived in a charcoal gray prison suit, still wearing that arrogant grin. But this time, there were no applause breaks. The prosecution unveiled a 900-page indictment, 40 witnesses, and forensic evidence that spanned 12 countries. Victor's defense? That he was a visionary misunderstood by the system. But the jury didn't buy it, and neither did the world. When Eva Moreau took the stand, the room fell silent. She described the threats, the cover-ups, the moment she realized her father had died because of Victor's lies. Her voice cracked only once, when she said, "I don't want revenge. I want truth." Victor refused to look at her, and for the first time his hands trembled. She had pulled back the curtain on the wizard, and all that remained was a coward. While the trial raged on, regulators and law enforcement raided what remained of Victor's holdings. 42 shell corporations were dissolved. Over 60 bank accounts frozen. A private island seized. 2 former senators charged with accepting bribes. Victor's inner circle began to flip. Arjun Bhatt testified. So did former legal counsel Monica Ray, in exchange for immunity. The dominoes fell one by one. He had built his empire like a house of cards. Now it was ash. The jury deliberated for only 5 hours. Guilty on all 37 counts. Victor's sentence: 220 years in federal prison without parole. As the judge read the verdict, Victor's face remained blank. No emotion, no rage, just the eerie calm of a man who believed, somehow, he'd still win. He leaned over to his lawyer and whispered, "I'll be out in 10. But everyone knew. He was never leaving that courtroom a free man again. Victor was sent to USP Florence Admax, the highest security federal prison in the United States. He wasn't a celebrity there. He was just another number. He offered financial advice to guards, tried bribing his way to special treatment, even wrote a book proposal. None of it worked. His charm didn't reach through barbed wire and steel. And for the first time in his life, no one believed him. Months after sentencing, An unauthorized interview with Victor leaked. In it, he spoke about regret, not for his crimes, but for being ahead of his time. He blamed a jealous system and weak minds who couldn't see the future. But then, just before the footage cut off, the camera caught something strange. Victor looked away, then quietly muttered, "You think this ends with me? You have no idea what's coming next." It was a warning or a threat, and it left a chilling question. Was Victor really acting alone? In the months after Victor's sentencing, strange patterns began to emerge. A healthcare startup in Singapore was exposed for faking clinical trials. A crypto hedge fund in Dubai vanished overnight with over $400 million in investor funds. A luxury real estate company in Miami turned out to be selling buildings that didn't exist. Every single one followed Victor's playbook: shell firms, staged media, fake CEOs, and the illusion of rapid success. Victor may have been locked up, but his methods weren't. Despite his conviction, Victor gained an unsettling fan base. Online forums hailed him as a misunderstood genius. Podcasts defended him. YouTube channels made documentaries comparing him to Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. One TikTok account even reenacted his courtroom speeches with music and slow motion. A documentary titled "The Visionary" hit #1 on streaming platforms, portraying him as a fallen prophet. It wasn't just disturbing, it was dangerous, because his con had become a template, and now people were emulating it for clout. Interpol, the FBI, and financial task forces worked day and night to trace Victor's stolen funds. They recovered nearly $9.7 billion, but at least $3.2 billion was still missing. Gone. Hidden behind encrypted wallets, phantom trusts, and dormant shell companies. Some believed it was lost forever. Others whispered that Victor had orchestrated a long-game strategy, a backup plan. After all, he had prepared for every possibility except failure. Or had he? Eva Moreau, once the lone whistleblower, was now a face of reform. She founded the Caldwell Project, a global initiative for financial transparency and corporate accountability. Her mission was simple: make sure this never happens again. But the threats didn't stop. Anonymous emails warned her to back off. A break-in at her nonprofit's office left nothing taken. Just a single message scribbled on the wall: "You killed the king. The court is still alive." She was no longer fighting Victor. She was fighting the network he left behind. Federal prosecutor Marian Doyle became a household name overnight. She received awards, offers for book deals, even a rumored TV series based on her courtroom strategy. But behind the glamour was a woman under constant threat. Her husband was followed. Her child's school received false bomb threats. Her car was hacked. Marianne had taken down a man whose empire extended into politics, global finance, and black market tech. Now, the shadow world was retaliating, and she knew it wasn't over. A mysterious hacker known only as Neon Spectre reached out to Interpol with a flash drive. Inside, 280 gigabytes of Victor's communications, emails, voice memos, contracts, and surveillance footage. But there was something even more damning. A spreadsheet titled Fallout Contingency, Tier 7. It named 9 high-ranking figures in government, business, and law enforcement individuals Victor referred to as the Council. They weren't just clients. They were collaborators. And the world hadn't even scratched the surface. 6 months after Victor's sentencing, news broke that his former financial strategist, Marcus Leclerc, was found dead in his Lisbon apartment, an apparent suicide. But Eva had seen the autopsy report. The timeline didn't match. The pills in his system were untraceable. The CCTV footage from his hallway was mysteriously wiped. Marcus was one of only 3 people who had access to the offshore keys. And someone wanted him gone before he talked. An investigative team followed a tip from the leaked files to a remote region off the Pacific coast. Coordinates led to an uncharted island, but satellite scans showed nothing. Still, the investigators took a boat to the location. And there it was, a privately owned island not listed on any government record. Armed guards, fenced perimeter, surveillance towers. They weren't sure what they'd found, but it had Victor's signature all over it. What else had he built? In the shadows, a chilling theory began circulating among financial crime experts. Victor had faked identities his entire life, owned passports under 16 aliases, had plastic surgeons on retainer, knew how to disappear better than anyone, and some believed he already had. Was the man in prison really Victor Caldwell? Or a decoy groomed to take the fall? One ex-CIA profiler even claimed Victor's voice and facial behavior during the sentencing didn't match prior records. The prison released no comment. And Victor? He just smiled. Late one night, Eva received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sentence. The first con was believing I ever existed. Attached was a photograph, grainy, black and white. A man on a beach in South America, facing the ocean. It looked like Victor, or someone pretending to be him. There was no way to tell, but the message was clear. The game wasn't over. In a dusty archive in Zurich, an independent journalist uncovered a citizenship file from 1998 under the name Julian Mercier, a man who bore a striking resemblance to a young Victor. Bank records traced back to that identity showed decades of silent wealth movement. Purchases in Argentina, properties in Laos, medical expenses for cosmetic procedures in Eastern Europe. Victor hadn't just built a false life. He'd built two and maybe more. How many versions of him existed across the world? A Swiss private banker, Roland Ziegler, died in a fiery car explosion on his way to testify in a sealed court proceeding related to Caldwell Holdings. Security footage showed a shadowy figure placing something under his vehicle the night before. Authorities called it sabotage. Witnesses called it assassination. Roland had managed several of Victor's offshore trust accounts. Some believed he was prepared to name other billionaires involved. But now he was just another body in the wake. An anonymous whistleblower within the prison system leaked a document that would rock the case. DNA samples from the man in custody as Victor Caldwell were compared against old medical records from his luxury health spa visits. The results didn't match. Was it a lab error, or proof of a far deeper deception? Was Victor the puppet master, or just another puppet in his own web? With pressure mounting, a multi-agency task force launched Operation Cypherfall, targeting 26 suspected collaborators tied to Victor's empire. Over 70 coordinated raids took place in 11 countries. Arrests included a tech CEO in Silicon Valley, a high-ranking official in Dubai, an arms dealer in Montenegro, a hedge fund owner in Manhattan. Each had received funds from one of Victor's many shell firms. Each had helped the lie grow. The mysterious island discovered earlier, codenamed Project Spectre, was stormed by international authorities after weeks of surveillance. What they found stunned investigators. A biometric vault containing multiple passports and IDs, all Victor's face, different names. Advanced facial reconstruction tools. A crypto mining facility churning out millions in untraceable coin. The crown jewel? A hidden server room with files that weren't just about Victor's crimes. They were leverage on hundreds of powerful people. Blackmail, insurance, and control. From the island servers, cyber experts decrypted a final message Victor had recorded months before his arrest. In the video, he sat in a dark room, backlit, face calm. This was never about money. It was about showing how easy it is to make you believe. I didn't con the system. I was the system. He smiled, then looked directly at the camera. If you're watching this, I'm already gone. And just like that, the screen went black. 1 year after Victor's arrest, Eva Moreau held a press conference. She had obtained new evidence from a former Caldwell executive, handwritten journals by Victor himself. In them, Victor described a psychological experiment. His companies weren't real businesses, he wrote. They were behavioral ecosystems, designed to test how far people would go for wealth, status, and control. Victor wasn't just scamming people. He was studying them. In the shadows of Victor's fall, a new breed of conmen began to rise. They called themselves Caldwellians. They followed Victor's doctrines: illusion over truth, influence over integrity, spectacle over substance. Webinars, private retreats, investment masterminds. It was a cult masquerading as entrepreneurship. Victor's empire had collapsed, but his ideology had taken root. And it was growing. A dormant crypto wallet moved $75 million to an unknown address. It belonged to one of Victor's earliest shell companies, long thought frozen. The signature on the transaction? V. Caldwell_777. Interpol couldn't trace the destination. No one could. Had someone broken into the wallet? Or had Victor, somewhere out there, reached back from the void? The ghost of his empire was alive. And it was spending money. Eva, years older, visited the prison. She requested to see Victor. The guards led her to a dimly lit booth. He was there, silent, gaunt, hollow-eyed. She asked him one question. Was this all just a game to you? Victor slowly leaned in and whispered, "It still is." Then he winked. And for the first time, Eva didn't feel anger. She felt cold, because she realized the scariest part wasn't what he did. It was that he'd never stopped. It began with a routine head count. At 5 a.m. on a rain-slick Monday morning, guards at Blackridge Federal Penitentiary opened cell block E. They expected to see Victor Caldwell sitting on his cot, reading his usual financial reports from the commissary. Instead, the cell was empty. No signs of forced entry. No breached security cameras. No alarm triggered. Just an unmade bed and a single envelope resting on. The envelope found in Victor's cell was addressed to Eva Moreau. Inside, one page, typed and unsigned. "Truth is the most valuable currency in the world. That's why I bought all of it." Underneath the message was a fingerprint, not Victor's. It belonged to a man who died 10 years earlier. Was it a taunt or a code? Either way, one thing was now undeniable. Victor Caldwell had vanished. Within hours, the prison went into lockdown. Interpol issued a red notice. The U.S. Marshals, CIA, MI6, and Europol mobilized. Dozens of agents who had worked Victor's case were pulled from active duty. Why? Because each of them had received the same message in different formats. "You helped trap me once. Let's see if you can do it again." V. Victor wasn't hiding. He was hunting. Financial institutions in 5 countries reported sudden activity in dormant shell accounts linked to Victor's old empire. Not withdrawals. Deposits. Large ones. One bank in Panama received $40 million labeled Repentance Fund. Another in the Cayman Islands was renamed overnight to Phoenix Sovereign Trust. Victor wasn't just moving money. He was rebuilding. Forensic analysts examined footage from the prison 2 days before Victor's escape. They noticed something off. A man in a cleaning uniform who never entered or exited through the staff checkpoints. He walked with Victor's exact posture. Facial mapping placed a 92% probability match it was him. Or a clone. Or a surgically altered body double. No one knew for sure. The question now wasn't how Victor escaped. It was who they'd locked up in the first place. Eva Moreau returned to the forefront. But this time, she wasn't sounding the alarm. She was leading the chase. With clearance from global intelligence agencies, Eva formed a task force known as Project Ghostwire. Her goal was singular. "I brought him down once. I'll do it again. This time, for good." She wasn't chasing a man. She was chasing a myth with fingerprints. 10 days after the escape, a strange live stream appeared across thousands of hijacked smart TVs and billboards in major cities. It was Victor, or someone pretending to be. He sat in a throne-like chair, face obscured by shadows. "You believed in your systems. You believed in your walls. Now watch how easily they crumble." The feed cut. Panic erupted. Markets shook. And the world remembered. One man had once controlled everything. In the deep web, chatter buzzed about the Caldwell auction, a digital marketplace offering stolen identities, offshore assets, and encrypted blackmail packages, allegedly curated by Victor himself. Each file began at $1 million in crypto, and buyers were everywhere. Corrupt politicians, rogue CEOs, foreign spies. Victor wasn't selling data. He was selling leverage. And in doing so, he was becoming untouchable again. A photograph surfaced in Marrakesh. A man, obscured by sunglasses, exiting a luxury villa. It looked like Victor. Interpol dismissed it as doctored. But Eva's team traced the property's deed, recently purchased by a shell firm called Viral Blackstream Holdings. The director, Julian Mercier, Victor's oldest known alias. Either Victor was careless, or he wanted to be found. Within Project Ghostwire, Eva discovered something sickening. One of her team leads, Agent Coldero, was feeding Victor information. Not for money, for belief. "He's not a con man," Darrow said as he was arrested. "He's the cure. You just don't see the sickness yet." Victor didn't just have followers. He had disciples. And now they were inside every system Eva trusted. In an abandoned luxury villa in Greece, Eva's team found what they believed to be Victor's last known ledger, a leather-bound journal titled The Collapse Doctrine. Inside were lists, people, systems, passwords, plans. But on the final page, one line stood alone. "All empires end. Mine will end with yours." It was no longer about escaping justice. It was about burning everything behind him. Eva discovered a pattern in the last offshore transactions. Each was timed with a market crash somewhere in the world. It wasn't random. Victor was orchestrating economic sabotage using blackmail files and digital assets as leverage. She devised a trap, a fake sovereign wealth fund, Promora Capital, offering $200 million in dark crypto, knowing Victor wouldn't resist. But to bait the spider, she had to step into his web. During a digital Caldwell auction, Victor's voice echoed in the dark web livestream. Suddenly, someone hijacked the feed. It was Eva. She broadcast the files Victor had weaponized, corrupt deals, espionage evidence, and false flag operations, to the entire world. Victor tried to shut it down, but the kill switch failed. His own auction house had been turned against him. Panic erupted among his buyers. The house of cards began to shake. A trail of digital breadcrumbs led Eva to an underground safe house in Prague. Inside, a dim hallway, a humming server, and a solitary man. Victor. He clapped as she entered, calm, smiling. "Took you long enough." But he wasn't alone. Dozens of armed guards surrounded her. And then, Eva spoke one word into her earpiece. "Now." SWAT teams descended through hidden walls and ceilings. Victor's guards were his own mercenaries, but Eva's intel had flipped them days earlier. The trap had worked. Under arrest, Victor was silent. Then came the DNA test, now with updated global biometric data. The result: Victor Caldwell never existed. The man in custody was born Mateo Verano, a Spanish orphan who vanished in 1983. Mateo had built every piece of Victor from scratch. Identity, face, accent, everything. He hadn't stolen wealth. He had stolen reality itself. Held in The Hague, Victor's trial was streamed worldwide. Dozens of victims gave emotional testimony. Eva, her voice shaking, told the court, "He didn't just steal billions. He made the world believe in the lie." Victor represented himself. He mocked the prosecution, but the evidence was overwhelming. Offshore vaults, forged passports, coercion memos, bodies, and money trails. During sentencing, Victor smirked and pulled one last card. He offered a USB drive to the judge. "One file, one truth. Open it, and you'll see the real enemy." The courtroom froze, but the judge declined. The drive was sealed, never opened. And Victor, for the first time, he blinked. He realized his power was gone. Victor was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms with no parole. He was transferred to a black site penitentiary known as the Hollow. No cameras, no visitors, no leverage. It was the one place he couldn't manipulate. There would be no escape this time. With Victor in prison and his secrets dumped worldwide, his followers began to crumble. CEOs resigned. Government officials were indicted. The Caldwellian movement splintered, its leaders fighting each other for scraps of influence. What once looked like a global empire was now a graveyard of broken men. Months later, Eva received a letter from the Hollow. It was from Victor. It read, "You still believe justice is a destination. I know it's a detour. Enjoy the illusion. V." She burned it, then walked away from the bureau. For the first time in a decade, she felt light. In a remote monastery in the Andes, a monk was spotted tending to gardens. Tourists snapped a photo. Facial recognition software pinged. 98.7% match to Victor Caldwell. Authorities investigated, but when they arrived, the monk was gone. On the windowsill, he had left a note. A man who lives 1,000 lies can only die once. Until then, he just disappears. Victor Caldwell was a ghost wearing a billionaire's suit. He scammed the world, not for money, but to show that truth can be bought and sold like stock. He's gone now, perhaps dead, perhaps watching. But one thing is clear, the system he exposed will never forget him, and neither will we. Justice, in the end, wasn't about catching him. It was about stopping him. And that, we finally did. Stay tuned for more chilling cases on Cold Case Chronicles, where the truth is always darker than fiction. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to Cold Case Chronicles. We dive deeper into the most chilling, unsolved mysteries, and together, we uncover what was left behind. Like, share, and leave a comment below. We want to hear your thoughts. Stay vigilant. Stay curious. The truth never rests.